This happened a few weeks ago. I was working the night shift as a nurse at a small hospital. I had just moved here for the job, and was still getting used to my new surroundings. The hospital felt weary. The floors were scuffed, and the lights flickered. I thought I could handle it, but I never expected what would happen. It started on my third shift. The night was quiet, too quiet. I was making my rounds when I heard a soft tapping sound. It was rhythmic, almost like someone was trying to get my attention. I figured it was some equipment acting up, or maybe a visitor was getting impatient. I went to check, but when I opened the door, the room was empty. No patients. No one waiting. Just a faint hum from a machine. My heart started racing. I shook it off and continued my rounds. The odd things started piling up. One night, sitting at the nurse's station, I saw something white dart past my peripheral vision. I turned my head. Nothing. Just a cold chill creeping up my spine. Maybe it was just lack of sleep. I told myself that. But then, I noticed the charts on the desk shift slightly, even though I was alone in the room. My stomach dropped. Something was wrong. A couple of nights later, I checked on a patient in room 204. She looked terrified. Her eyes were wide, and she barely whispered, "There's someone in the corner." I glanced back, but the room was empty. I asked her who, and she said she didn't know, but she felt someone watching her. My hands went cold. What was going on? Was it just her imagination, or was I losing my grip on reality? Things escalated quickly after that. I kept hearing strange noises, whispers, or faint tapping coming from the halls while I worked. I would look, but there was nothing there. I found myself avoiding certain rooms, the feeling of being watched settling deep inside me. Each night, I tried to shake it off, but the unease grew. Then one night, I was heading to the break room, and I saw a figure at the end of the hallway. My heart raced. I stopped, but in an instant, it was gone. I felt frozen. Was I just tired? My mind was playing tricks, or was it something else? I didn't know what to think. That night felt heavier than the others. My hands trembled as I poured a cup of coffee. The whispers grew louder, overlapping. I couldn't understand them, but they felt urgent. I glanced towards the hallway again, and I thought I saw shadows moving. Just before I went back to my duties, I heard a voice. It was soft, almost a whisper. "Help us!" I couldn't move. I stood there, terrified. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I didn't know what was happening in that place, or if I was truly losing my mind. All I knew was that something was very wrong in that hospital, and I still wonder if I was ready to find out exactly what. The next night was worse. I arrived at the hospital, and the atmosphere felt heavier. Were the whispers louder? It was hard to tell. I tried to shake off the dread clinging to me, but every step I took seemed to echo in the empty halls. I started my shift by checking on my patients. Room 204 was empty. The bed was made, but I could still feel the eerie vibe lingering in the air. That was when I heard it again, the soft tapping. It was so rhythmic, it was almost like a warning. I paused, heart racing, and listened. The sound seemed to come from the supply closet down the hall. Against my better judgment, I decided to investigate. I crept toward the closet, each step weighted with uncertainty. When I reached for the handle, an overwhelming urge to run surged through me, but I forced myself to open the door. Inside, I found nothing out of the ordinary, just shelves of medical supplies. I sighed in relief, but as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye. A flash of white again. It darted past the doorway, quick as lightning. My breath caught in my throat. Had I imagined it? I leaned out into the hallway. Still nothing. Just shadows playing tricks under the flickering lights. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling the chill. I told myself it was just my imagination. I needed to focus on my patients. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Later that night, I returned to the nurse's station to check the charts. I could still hear the tapping sound, but this time, it was accompanied by whispers that sent shivers down my spine. Panic bubbled up inside me. I grabbed a chart, trying to distract myself. But then, I felt a presence behind me. I turned slowly, my heart pounding. The hallway seemed darker, more oppressive. Then I saw a figure at the far end, draped in shadows. I squinted, trying to make out the face, but it was obscured. The tapping intensified, like a frantic plea, and I knew I wasn't alone. "Help us," I whispered back, a sense of hopelessness washing over me. But what could I do? I was just a nurse. I took a deep breath and stepped back, trying to gauge my next move. That was when I heard the door to room 206 creak open. I felt a surge of fear. The patient in that room had been unresponsive for days. I hadn't even seen her move in hours. I approached cautiously, each step cautious. As I peered inside, my skin prickled. The room was dark, but through the slant of the moonlight, I could see her sitting up in bed. Her eyes were wide, glazed, and she was staring directly at me. "Help me," she rasped, but her voice was hollow, as if it echoed from somewhere deep within the hospital. My heart sank. She was as troubled as I was. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. I spun around, fear gripping me. Was it just machinery? Or something more sinister? With trembling hands, I turned back to the patient. But when I looked, she wasn't there. The bed was empty once more. Toppling confusion and dread raced through me. I glanced at the hallway again, where the shadows seemed alive. Whatever was happening in that hospital was escalating, and I felt like I was losing control. I needed to find out what was going on. I had to uncover the truth before it consumed me whole. But what I discovered next would change everything. Then everything went dark. I gasped as the darkness enveloped me. For a moment, I felt weightless, suspended in fear. I blinked, trying to adjust my eyes, but it was thick and impenetrable blackness. I reached out, desperate for anything solid. My fingers brushed the cool metal of the nurse's station. I took a deep breath and steadied myself. I could still hear the whispers, muffled yet urgent. I clutched the desk, feeling the sharp edges bite into my palms. I had a job to do, and I wouldn't let fear swallow me whole. After what felt like an eternity, the lights flickered back on, brighter than before. My heart raced as the buzz of fluorescent lamps filled the air. I was back in the hospital, but everything felt different. The shadows shifted, and the oppressive atmosphere returned, heavier than ever. I glanced toward room 206, half expecting to see the woman in bed again. But when I looked, the door was wide open, and the room was dark. That's when I heard the soft tapping again. It was like a heartbeat, quickening with my pulse. I decided to check on my other patients. Room 202 was supposed to have an elderly man who had been recovering from surgery. But when I opened the door, I was met with an empty bed, just like room 204. Confusion settled in. Where were my patients? I felt their absence like a physical ache. Then, a sudden sound caught my attention. A soft giggle echoed from the end of the hallway. Goosebumps climbed my arms. I cautiously moved closer, straining to hear. The laughter continued, light and airy. It was childlike, out of place in the sterile environment of the hospital. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling. "Is anyone there?" The giggling stopped instantly. Silence fell, and the tension thickened around me. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching. That was when I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, something darting behind a corner. My heart raced. I rushed toward it, driven by a mixture of fear and curiosity. It had to be a patient. Maybe someone had wandered too far. As I turned, I nearly collided with a child. She stood in the middle of the hallway, small and fragile, hair cascading over her shoulders. Her eyes were wide and innocent, but there was something unsettling about her presence. "Are you lost?" I asked, kneeling to her level. But she didn't respond. Instead, she pointed down the hall, leading me deeper into the shadows. I hesitated, feeling my mind scream at me to turn back. But I couldn't abandon her. I stood, my instincts screaming danger. "We need to go back. It's not safe here." Just as I turned to lead her away, she vanished. One moment she was there, the next nothing but air where she had stood. Once again, the whispers filled the atmosphere, now frantic and pleading. I felt panic well up in my chest. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice wavering. That S when the lights flickered again, and an icy wind swept through the corridor. I looked toward room 206. There was movement inside. The door creaked open, and a small figure emerged from the darkness. I took a step back, heart racing. I had a choice to make. I could run, or I could find out the truth. My heart pounded as I took a step forward. Whatever was happening, I needed answers. But as I moved closer, a dread settled in my gut. Then everything fell silent. The silence was suffocating. I peered into room 206, but the figure had disappeared just as quickly as it had appeared. I felt a shiver travel down my spine. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but I craved a sense of normalcy, one that seemed to be slipping through my fingers. I forced myself to breathe, each inhale feeling heavier than the last. The hallway around me was still, but it didn't feel empty. It felt alive, pulsing with unspoken tension. I backed away from the door, my instincts screaming for me to get out, but where could I go? A sudden crash echoed from the supply room. My heart leapt as I pivoted toward the noise, my eyes darting back and forth. There it was again, a loud thud. I couldn't ignore it. For a brief moment, I considered calling for help, but I was alone on this night shift. Steeling myself, I approached the door to the supply room. The temperature dropped as I got closer, the air thickening with an unsettling chill. I grasped the handle, and after a moment of hesitation, pushed it open. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Shelves lined with medical supplies jutted out like specters in the dim glow. Then, I saw a toppled box of bandages sprawled across the floor. When I stepped inside, my foot brushed against something solid. I looked down, finding a small, worn-out doll, its button eyes staring up at me. My heart sank as I recognized it, the same doll the girl had clutched earlier. "How did you get here?" I whispered, the edges of my voice trembling. It felt like the walls were closing in on me, the atmosphere thickening. Just then, the lights flickered again before plunging the room into darkness. My heartbeat surged, each thump echoing in the void. I quickly scanned the area, desperate for any sign of the girl or an exit. In that moment, I heard it, faint quiet sobbing, low and broken. It sent ice through my veins. I moved toward the sound, each step calculated, knowing I was going deeper into something I couldn't understand. "Hello?" I called out again, bracing myself for a response. The sobbing faded, replaced by a soft, echoing whisper, calling my name. "Help me!" Adrenaline surged as I looked toward the back of the room. There, in the corner, something was shifting. I could barely see, but I sensed a presence lurking just beyond my reach. A wave of dread crashed over me, urging me to run, yet I felt drawn to help whoever or whatever was there. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, with a blinding brightness. The room was empty, the sobbing gone. I was left standing alone, the doll clutched in my hand, its unmoving eyes watching me. That S when I noticed something on the wall behind me. Scrawled in what looked like dark ink, A word stood out. Run. My breath caught in my throat. I spun around, heart pounding, but a crashing sound echoed from the hallway. The door slammed shut, leaving me in a cold, dim silence. There was no turning back now. In that moment, I understood I was not alone, and whatever lingered in this hospital was not finished with me yet. Panic surged through me as the door slammed shut. I was trapped, and the weight of that realization pressed against my chest. I turned back toward the shelves, searching for an escape route. The doll felt heavy in my hand, a tangible reminder of the girl and the whisper that had called to me. I took a step toward the door, trying to handle, but it wouldn't budge. My heart raced as I glanced around the supply room, scanning for any potential escape. I noticed the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall and felt a flicker of hope. It might not be the perfect tool, but it could help me break down the door if needed. Before I could formulate a plan, I heard a light scraping noise from the corner of the room where I had sensed the presence. It was back. I squinted into the darkness, desperately trying to make out shapes in the dim light. "Is anyone there?" The words came out more as a plea than a challenge. The scraping grew louder, more frantic, as if something was trying to claw its way out. My breath hitched in my throat. I could feel the static in the air, a sign that whatever was happening was escalating. Then I saw it. A shadow darted across the wall, too fast for me to comprehend. I felt my instincts kick in, urging me to retreat. But the corner of the sound that was where the girl must have been. I took another cautious step. "Please, I want to help you," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady, though it trembled from a mix of fear and determination. The scraping stopped abruptly, replaced by silence, so profound it muffled my own heartbeat. I clenched the doll tighter, feeling the fabric of its dress tug at my skin. Then, without warning, the lights grew dark again, but this time I was prepared. I focused on the sounds around me, listening intently. I could hear soft footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate. My mind raced. Should I run? Yell for help? But deep down, I knew there was no one to hear me. This isolation wrapped around me like a shroud. Just then, the lights flickered back on, and what I saw made my stomach drop. In the corner stood the girl, her face pale and gaunt, the same one I'd tried to help earlier. But now, her eyes were wide and terrified, her lips moving as if she were trying to scream, but no sound escaped. My breath quickened, fear gripping me as I realized she wasn't alone. Something loomed behind her, dark and shifting, wrapping around her like smoke. It was then that I knew the doll was crucial. It was the link between us. With newfound urgency, I tossed the doll toward her. "Take it. It's yours," I shouted, desperate for her to understand. As it hit the ground, the presence behind her surged forward, tendrils of darkness curling around the girl, pulling her back. I could see the sheer terror in her wide eyes. "No!" I shouted, rushing forward, feeling reckless as adrenaline surged through me. I had to save her, even if it meant confronting whatever that thing was. But in one swift motion, the lights cut out completely, plunging me into a darkness thicker than I'd ever experienced. In that void, I could hear only the girl's soft whimper and the echo of my pounding heart. And then everything went silent. I stood in the darkness, frozen. All my instincts screamed at me to run, but I couldn't leave the girl behind. My heart raced as I strained to hear any sound, any clue about what was happening in this suffocating silence. Just as I thought I couldn't endure it any longer, a faint light began to flicker back to life. I squinted, trying to adjust my eyes to the dim glow. When it finally settled, I saw the girl still standing there, still trapped. But the thing behind her, it seemed to have changed. Instead of just looming, it now shifted slightly, revealing a part of itself that I hadn't noticed before. Jagged edges, like shards of glass, gleamed ominously. "Help me," the girl's whisper cut through the air, fragile and trembling. I could barely hear it, but it sent chills down my spine. This time, she wasn't just moving her lips. Her voice, thin and desperate, filled the air, pulling at my resolve. "I'm trying," I replied, feeling frustrated and helpless. "What can I do?" The moment hung in the air, shrouded by the tension that gripped the room. I darted my eyes around for anything, a way to break the hold that dark entity had on her. Then I spotted something glinting beneath the shelves, a small shard of metal, maybe a clip or a tool from a nearby cabinet. It was a stretch, but it was all I had. I bent down, groping for it, when a sudden whoosh of air caressed my face. My instinct was to flinch back. I hesitated, but the girl's gaze pulled me back to her. I could see tears pooling in her eyes, shimmering in the flickering light. "Please," she said again, and the sound seemed to carry a weight beyond her words. I snatched the metal shard and stood up straight, determination fueling my movements. With a deep breath, I approached the girl, keeping my eyes focused on her, and not on the dark figure threatening to swallow her whole. "Stay calm," I said, holding the shard tightly. I had no plan other than to act. I was done waiting. "I'll cut the ties that bind you." I gestured toward the darkness coiling around her. At my words, the figure stirred, its movements erratic and furious. Tendrils shot out, snapping toward me like angry vipers, but I didn't have time to think. I lunged forward, swiping at the darkness with the metal shard. It connected, and the unexpected impact sent a shockwave through the room. The tendrils recoiled as if stung, and a guttural growl emanated from the shadows. The girl gasped, a hint of hope shining in her eyes. "Keep going, please," she urged, her voice stronger now. I could feel the energy shifting, her spirit igniting. I struck again and again. The darkness writhed, struggling to maintain its grip on her. With one last frantic stab, I aimed for the heart of it, the center where I sensed a pulse of darkness. And then the lights burst back on, vibrant and blinding. For a brief moment, I caught sight of a face twisted and angry before the entity screamed, a sound of fury that made the ground shake. The room spun, and I was thrown to the floor as an electric shock coursed through me. In that instant, I saw the girl break free, her figure shimmering as the shadows separated from her form. She stood, finally liberated, and our eyes met. But just as relief washed over me, I noticed something strange. The fire extinguisher I had seen earlier was on the ground, leaking a mist that swirled around the room. It was forming a shape, that S when everything went dark again. I woke up on the cold floor, gasping. The lights had flickered off again, plunging everything back into a heavy silence. My head throbbed, and the taste of metal lingered in my mouth. Instinctively, I reached for the girl, but the air felt empty around me. Where was she? I scrambled to my feet, but the shadows that had been a few moments ago now lay silent in the corners of the room. The mist from the fire extinguisher twisted in the air like a ghostly figure, barely illuminated by the emergency lights. I could see glimpses of the girl's silhouette through the haze. She was standing across the room, but something was wrong. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice shaky. She turned slowly, her eyes wide but devoid of the sparkle they held just moments ago. I can't move," she said, her voice flat. The room pulsed with a strange energy that made my heart race. "What do you mean you can't move? I thought I freed you." Fear crept in, the dread tangling with the earlier relief. The dark mist began to swirl around her ankles, crawling up her legs like hungry vines. I rushed towards her, desperation fueling my steps. "No! Not again!" I yelled, wielding the metal shard as a weapon against the mist creeping up her body. But the shield of darkness that had once held her captive seemed to have returned, stronger than before. I slashed at the creeping shadows, but they only seemed to mock me. Each contact felt futile, as if the mist were just absorbing my attempts. "Help me!" she cried, panic rising in her voice. Then, a sound broke through, sharp and chilling. It echoed around us, sending tremors through my bones. It wasn't coming from the girl. It was deeper, from somewhere beyond. I paused, my eyes darting around the room, searching for the source. That's when I noticed a flicker of movement near the doorway, barely visible through the mist. A shadow shifted, but this one was different. It moved with purpose, and it wasn't like the darkness surrounding the girl. The figure emerged, elongated and distorted, like a living shadow. My breath quickened as it stepped into the dim light, revealing hollow eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. Panic ignited within me, but I couldn't abandon the girl. "Stay back," I shouted, brandishing the shard. But my voice felt small against the enormity of the fear cascading over me. "Please help," she implored again, now genuinely terrified, eyes locked on the new figure creeping toward me. I had no choice. I had to confront this new threat. As the creature approached, the air crackled with a sense of menace. It wanted more than just to consume. It wanted to feed on our fear. Chaos erupted as the girl's cries filled the space, mixing with the low growl of the creature. It took a step forward, and I took one back, my heart racing as I realized I had to stand my ground. But in my heart, a question burned with urgency. What did it truly want? Before I could answer, the mist surged and enveloped me, blinding me once more. Everything went dark again, but this time, I could hear their voices, echoes of despair whispering in the void. I opened my eyes, the darkness closing in around me like a suffocating blanket. Voices whispered just out of reach, fading in and out like echoes in an empty hall. My heart raced as I pushed myself up, trying to find solid ground. The cold floor pressed against my palms, grounding me for a moment before I stood. "Where are you?" I called out, my voice more like a cracked plea, but there was no answer. The room felt enormous in its emptiness. I turned slowly, scanning for any sign of her, or even the creature that had been lurking in the shadows. The mist lingered, a fine layer of chill clinging to my skin. I stumbled forward, trying to remember which direction the girl had been in last. Everything was hazy, as if I were wading through thick fog. Panic clawed at my chest. I had to find her. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the far side of the room, making me jump. I focused, straining my ears. Nothing followed that sound except silence. Summoning what little courage I had left, I moved cautiously toward it. I reached a storage room door, just beyond the shadows. It was ajar, swinging slightly as if it had just been nudged. "Hello?" I dared to call out again, my voice trembling. I stepped inside, the faintest flickers of light seeping from despite the chaos of the main room. Then, I saw it on the floor lay a small metal object, glinting strangely in the dim light. I knelt down, recognizing it as a hospital badge. It was hers. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived as I caught sight of something dark shifting at the edge of my vision. The creature. "Get away from her," I shouted, more angry than afraid now. I lifted the shard, ready to defend myself and the girl. But the shadow hesitated as if debating its next move. "Don't you take her?" I felt a surge of fierce protectiveness rise in me. I clawed my way toward the shadow, heart pounding furiously, but it seemed to sense my defiance. In an instant, it lunged, spilling shadows like ink over the floor. For a split second, I felt helpless, trapped in its gaze. That's when I remembered the badge. I held it up like a shield. "This is hers. You have no power here," I yelled, my voice louder than the pounding of my heart. What followed was like a wave crashing against a weak dam. The shadow recoiled, momentarily stunned as if caught off guard by the force of my words, my belief. I pressed forward, not letting up. "You want her? You'll have to go through me first." The room shook with energy, a perilous dance of light and dark swirling around us. I felt the warmth from the badge bleed into my hand, igniting a new strength within me. I wasn't just defending, I was fighting back. Then I saw the girl's silhouette rushing towards me from behind the chaos, her form clearer now amidst shadows. "Help me," she echoed, reaching out. But before I could respond, the shadows surged violently toward her, and I knew I had to act fast. Time was running out. That's when I caught a glimpse of something glinting in the shadows, a fresh, pulsating darkness that formed a shape I could not comprehend. I knew I had to face it head-on. "Stay behind me," I shouted, preparing for what was to come next. The shadow lunged again, but this time I was ready. I stepped forward, heightening my grip on the badge. "Not today," I shouted, my voice stronger than I felt. The shadows hesitated, swirling around me like a tempest on the verge of breaking. The girl was behind me, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "What are you doing?" "Just run," she cried out. I couldn't not without knowing she was safe. "I want to leave you," I called back, my heart racing. In this moment, I didn't feel brave. I felt desperate. As I stepped into the murky darkness, the badge warmed against my skin, almost alive. I waved it in front of me, painting the shadows with its light. Instantly, a path cleared, cutting through the blackness like a knife. "Come on," I yelled, hoping she would follow. Together, we could face this, but she hesitated. "What if it's too dangerous?" "Can't be more dangerous than standing here. Trust me." My frustration was palpable, but fear gripped me in its icy fingers. With a shaky inhale, she edged toward me, eyes flicking nervously from the shadows to the badge. Just then, the creature let out a guttural sound, echoing through the room. The noise vibrated in my bones, making the air thick and heavy. I felt the courage sink. "Please, just trust me." And then, something unexpected happened. A silver light burst from the badge, illuminating the room and pushing back the shadows like a sunrise. The creature shrieked, and for a moment, I thought it might evaporate entirely. But then, with a fierce roar, the darkness collided with the light again. "We need to go now," I shouted again, grabbing her arm and pulling her forward. She stumbled but kept pace, her breath shaky, as we rushed into the clearing created by the badge. Suddenly, the badge flickered, and the pulse of light dimmed. The shadows expanded, rushing back in to reclaim their territory. We had to find an exit. I turned toward the doorway we had come through, but it seemed far away, the way shifting and changing. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Away from here," I replied, my mind racing. The darkness pressed in around us. It felt alive, hungry. Then, a sharp crack echoed nearby, and I turned to see the storage room wall fracturing, crumbling as if the very structure could no longer hold its weight. "This way," I shouted, running toward the break where the wall met the floor. The girl followed, fear etched across her face. "What if it comes after us?" "It can't. I promise," I said. We pushed through the jagged opening, my hand still clutching the badge. As we entered a narrow passage behind the wall, I glanced back to see the creature, writhing in frustration, unable to follow us, but something was wrong. The passage was dark, swallowing us whole. I could still hear the remnant echoes of the creature's roars as they faded behind us. "Keep going," I urged, my voice tight. Just then, a whisper drifted through the air, a voice I recognized. "Help me," it was soft, almost pleading, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "What was that?" the girl asked, her eyes wide with alarm. "I don't know," I started, but then the whispers grew louder, filling the space around us. Before I could react, the ground beneath us shifted. The walls began to close in, as if the darkness wanted to reclaim us. I turned to run, but the passage was shifting, morphing into a form I couldn't comprehend. "We have to move fast," I shouted, adrenaline spiking. We accelerated, but a sudden jolt stopped us in our tracks. Something was blocking our escape. There was no way out of this place, and panic surged through me. "Are we trapped?" the girl gasped, glancing over her shoulder. I looked back, my stomach sinking. "There has to be a way. We can't give up now." Just then, a cold breeze rushed past us, chilling me to the bone. "What is that?" I froze. That's when I saw it, a figure forming in the darkness beyond the passage. The outline of a person, but twisted and wrong, watching us. I took a step back, dread pooling in my chest. "We need to hurry," I yelled, heart racing. But a chilling realization hit me. It wasn't just about fleeing anymore. There were answers here, and I was determined to find them. I took a deep breath and focused on the encroaching shadows. Fear gripped my heart, but I couldn't let that stop me, not now. With renewed determination, I pressed forward, urging the girl to follow as I started to step back into the shifting darkness. Something flickered in my peripheral vision, another figure darting into the shadows. It was hard to distinguish fear from desperation, but one thing was certain: I wouldn't allow whatever haunted these halls to take her from me. "Stay close," I called, moving past the shifting walls and feeling for a way forward. The whispers grew louder, echoing around us, pulling at the strings of our sanity. "Help us," they chanted, each voice layered a distorted symphony of pain. I could sense their sadness, their longing for rescue, and it struck a chord inside me. That feeling of helplessness, of despair perhaps, that was what bound them. With each step, the walls pressed in tighter, but somehow the atmosphere felt different, as if we were starting to break free from the weight of the darkness. "What do you want?" I shouted into the void, my voice echoing back at me. I was met with silence, a brief reprieve before the shadows swelled again. "What is happening?" the girl murmured, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "I don't know, but we're going to find out," I said, pushing forward. The badge in my pocket pulsed softly, as though it could sense the urgency in my heart. I needed guidance, and I remembered the fleeting glimpses of hope I'd seen in the girl's eyes, the connection we shared. Maybe I wasn't alone in this after all. Maybe together we could disentangle the threads of fear keeping us shackled to this night. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath us, and before I knew it, the pathway had veered sharply. I skidded to a halt, grabbing the girl's arm so she wouldn't fall. A jagged wall of shadow loomed ahead, blocking our path. "This can't be it," I muttered, furiously scanning for another escape route. But then I caught a glimmer in the darkness, the light flickering again. It drew me in like a moth to flame. "Wait," the girl said, stepping back. "What if it's a trap?" "I don't think it is," I replied, though the uncertainty gnawed at my insides. "We need to believe it's leading us somewhere safe." I felt her hesitation, but I pulled her along, the warmth of the badge guiding our way. As we approached the light, I could see broken remnants of the hospital, a room that looked familiar. In the distance, a dark spectral form moved just beyond the edges of light, watching us. I felt adrenaline surge, a compulsion to confront it, to find out if it was guardian or jailer. "This way," I urged again, bypassing the shadows in the corner of my vision. When we entered what seemed like an old patient room, the atmosphere shifted. It was brighter here, and the whispers softened into a hum. I could see a figure, the girl from before, no longer ghostly. She was solid, real, and filled with hope. "Help us, please," she said, before the shadow behind her flickered, momentarily revealing a figure, twisted, angry, still clawing at the edges of reality. "We're trying," I called, holding the badge forth as if it were a weapon. The girl's eyes widened, and then she pointed to something behind the dark figure. "The door is behind it. You can escape." My heart raced. "Stay back," I shouted as I stepped forward, adrenaline pooling in my veins. I could feel the shadows coiling around me, but this time I didn't hesitate. "Let her go!" I yelled, thrusting the badge in the creature's direction. The air crackled as the light burst from the badge, illuminating the dark figure's features for just a moment, distorted, painful. It howled, a sound filled with anguish and rage reverberating through the space. But I didn't flinch. I pressed on, using the light as a beacon guiding me forward. It roared, and as it did, the darkness seemed to fracture. Our worlds collided as the shadows surged toward me, cloaking everything once more in an impenetrable black. I shouted out as the floor disappeared from beneath us, and for a brief moment, I was suspended in pure darkness, the girl's hand in mine, and then the light flared back up. We landed on a hard surface, disoriented but alive. I gasped for air, blinking against the brightness. The hospital was quiet now, no whispers, no tapping, just stillness. I looked around and saw we were back at the nurse's station. The familiar surroundings felt surreal after all that had transpired. "What just happened?" the girl whispered, still gripping my hand tightly, her eyes scanning the empty halls. "I honestly don't know," I replied, my voice shaky. "But we made it out, didn't we?" She nodded slowly, the shadows dissipating like a faded memory. But unease coiled in my stomach. Something told me this was over. The hospital felt different, reclaiming its stillness like a breath held too long. As I looked into her eyes, questions filled my mind. How had we escaped? What had lingered behind us? Was it truly over, or was this only a pause, a reprieve before something darker returned? In the back of my mind, I knew I might never find the answers. I grasped her hand tighter, noticing shadows in my peripheral vision as we stepped toward the exit. I still think about it sometimes, what was real, and what was just a trick of fatigue. Did the spirits still wander those halls, whispering for help? I'd moved on, but the weight of that night settled deep within me. As I stepped outside, the sun began to rise, casting warmth after the long night. I looked back at the hospital one last time, the building looming dark and unyielding against the dawn. There were still too many questions left unanswered, and as I walked away with the girl beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness would always linger, just out of sight, waiting for another opportunity to return. I hoped it wouldn't be during my next shift.